To another video drasha. This week's portion is Vatitzaveh, but actually since today is Purim, I thought that we would take a break from discussing the weekly Torah portions and instead talk about the holiday. And as a matter of fact, Purim, I think, is my favorite holiday. I think many of us enjoy this holiday so much because it's a time of just celebration. And also, you don't have to worry about things like not turning on electricity and not driving. I think some of us say we wish all the Jewish holidays were like this. But, we have a bit of an unusual circumstance this year because Purim today, Friday, is the 14th of Adar. But that means that tomorrow, which is Shushan Purim, the 15th of Adar, falls on Shabbos. So one of the things that we should know is that we don't read the Megillah on Shabbos. So if Purim falls on Shabbos, you don't read the Megillah, the holiday is pushed forward. So the question is, what are they doing tomorrow in Jerusalem, where they do read the Megillah usually on the 15th of Adar? Now this brings up actually an interesting point, and that is Purim is the only Jewish holiday that has a different date for its observance depending on where you live. And let me clarify something. I'm sure some people are thinking, well, what about the fact that we observe holidays for 2 days if you live in the diaspora, but if you live in Israel, you only observe them for 1. But that's really a different issue. In that case, the problem has to do with the fact that in the early days, before there was a fixed calendar, there was some uncertainty as to the beginning of the month. And when the new moon, the new month, was declared in Jerusalem, they had to send messengers out to make this announcement. And it took them a long time before they got to places like Babylonia. And therefore, in order to prevent the situation where people might be eating chametz on the first day of Passover, people simply observed for 2 days, that way making sure that they would be observing the holiday. Now, you could say, and so outside of Israel, we observe holidays for 2 days, in Israel for 1, but that has to do with uncertainty about the calendar. Now, you could say, how about now we have a fixed calendar? It's not only now, even during the time of the Talmud, from around the 4th century, middle of the 4th century, there was a fixed calendar. And so the question is, why do we continue, and why did they continue to observe 2 days of the holidays in the diaspora? And the answer to that I can give you in one word: tradition. And that is exactly what the Talmud says. Minhag avotenu biyadenu, our fathers' customs are that this is how we do it, and therefore we're going to continue doing it that way, even though we now have a fixed calendar. But the situation with Purim is not that. In the Purim, the date of observance is different. For most places, it is the 14th of Adar. But if you live in a walled city, it is the 15th of Adar. It is a different day depending on where you live. And of course, this is what is called Shushan Purim because that's when it was observed in Shushan, where the action took place. And the reason for it is that really what we're celebrating on Purim is the day on which the Jews rested from their enemies. So on the 13th of Adar, the Jews fought their enemies, and on the 14th they rested. And that's why we celebrate the 14th of Adar. But in Shushan, the Jews were given an additional day to fight their enemies. Hence, they fought on the 13th and the 14th of Adar and rested on the 15th. And that's why in Shushan and then in all walled cities, Purim is observed on the 15th of Adar. And it's only really in Jerusalem today that it is observed that way, although there are some other cities where there is a custom of observing Purim on both the 14th and 15th because they're not quite sure which day they should be observing it on, whether they qualify as a walled city or not. But the fact is, what is going to be done this year when the 15th of Adar falls out on Shabbos? What are they going to do in Jerusalem? So they will be reading the Megillah on Friday, the 14th, with everybody else. But a friend of mine who lives in Jerusalem told me the custom is that they still do the other mitzvahs. They do the Seudah, the festive meal, and the Mishloach Manot, the sending of gifts one to another. They're going to do that on Sunday. So that's the situation there. But Purim is really a holiday that we should all celebrate because it is really a pure celebration. It is all about joy and happiness. And of course, we eat, we drink, we give presents. It's an unfortunate thing that for too many American Jews, Purim is a kind of, I call it a pediatric holiday. It's a holiday that if you have kids, you observe it. If you don't have kids, not necessarily. And yet, thank God, at the shul at Agudas Achim, I think we've always had a good attendance and on Purim, and it is a holiday that people have taken seriously because it should be. There is a statement in the tradition. I actually tracked this down once. It's in an obscure midrash that says that when the Messiah comes, there are only two holidays that are going to remain, and that is Purim and Yom Kippur. Now, if I were to put the question to any one of you, in the time of the Messiah, if holidays are going to be abrogated, but there are two holidays that are going to remain, what are they going to be? I mean, how many here would say, oh, yeah, well, there won't be Passover, there won't be Sukkot, there won't be Rosh Hashanah, but there's going to be Purim? How many people would have said that? And yet, that, again, there is such a tradition. And I think that the point of pairing the two, Yom Kippur and Purim, makes a very strong point. Because, look, Yom Kippur, nobody has any questions that this is the most holy day of the year. It's a day on which we fast, on which we clap ourselves. It's a day that we spend all day long in the synagogue making confessions and saying lengthy prayers. We're not even supposed to wear shoes on Yom Kippur. I mean, it's a day that everybody would identify as a holy and a solemn day. But Purim? But the fact is, this tradition makes it very clear. No, Purim, which is a day of celebration, of eating, drinking, sending presents, guess what? That's also a religious holiday. That's also a day that should be observed by all Jews. And I think that point comes through very clearly in this midrashic statement that in the time of the Messiah, only Purim and Yom Kippur will remain. The two holidays that seem to be on the extreme opposite ends of the pole. One is a day of solemnity and the other day of celebration. And yet, what we need to see is that both of them are holy. Both of them are quintessential religious holidays. So I hope everyone will have a freilich Purim, a happy Purim, and I look forward to speaking with you next week about the weekly Torah portion. Good Shabbos.